Hi! So for those of you who don't know, Panel Upon is a cozy little puzzle game developed by Intelligent Systems that was released for the Super Nintendo in 1995. It takes place in its own unique little world, has beautiful music and artwork, and is very, very odd. On an unrelated note, Tetris Attack is a cozy little puzzle game developed by Intelligent Systems that was released for the Super Nintendo in 1996. It takes place in the world of the Yoshi series, has beautiful music and artwork, and... yeah. Panel Upon and Tetris Attack are functionally the exact same game, and the reason for that is complicated. You see, Panel Upon was only ever released in Japan, seemingly because of a lack of confidence that it would sell well anywhere else. Sure, nowadays there are plenty of nerds like me from all over the world who will gladly engage with stuff like Panel Upon. But especially in the 90s, games that were so unashamedly cutesy and girly just didn't really appeal to the kinds of people games were usually marketed to, meaning it would be hard for it to find much of an audience. So alongside being translated into English, Panel Upon was converted into a Yoshi game, being renamed Tetris Attack. All in all, I think this was a pretty decent compromise. Tetris Attack is a great alternative to Panel Upon, with nearly all of its charm kept fully intact. In terms of gameplay, it is literally the exact same. It's got the same number of characters, it's got the fun combo system, it's got all the modes, Hold up. Was something... Why does Tetris Attack have an extra button? Does Panel Upon not have an options menu? Yeah, Panel Upon doesn't have an options menu. Like, if neither game had an options menu, that'd be fine, I guess, but Tetris Attack got one. How didn't Panel Upon? Was this options menu created specifically for Tetris Attack? And if it was, why? What reason was there to add something like this? How did anyone even have time to... Wait, what's this? This is a video of the options menu functioning inside of Panel Upon. What? Oh, Game Genie for Panel Upon. In case you don't know, a Game Genie is a specialized device that you can hook up to a game cartridge before putting it into a console. When you do, the Game Genie will basically interrupt the game cartridge's conversation with the console and allow you to change what it's saying. So it lets you mod retro games, which means that this menu was added to Panel Upon through modding. But something doesn't seem right here. You see, Game Genie codes, like the ones provided in the description, contain very small amounts of data. Unless you plan on chaining a bunch of them together, they're usually reserved for pretty small changes. Sure, this menu technically takes 2 codes separated by the plus sign, but shouldn't it require way more than that? Like, this is a big menu that has real impacts on gameplay. Any one of these options should take up an entire Game Genie code of its own. Was this entire menu really modded in with just 2 codes? Well, no, it wasn't. Because, as it turns out, hidden away in the code of every copy of Panel Upon is this options menu. It's just chilling there, unable to be accessed. These codes aren't what created this menu. It was already in the game. There just wasn't a button that let you access it. And that's what these codes change. So that has some pretty big implications. This options menu was at some point worked on and supposed to be in Panel Upon. It was basically finished, but for whatever reason just wasn't included in the final game. And because of how similar it is to Tetris Attacks, I think it's safe to say that that game's options menu is just a finished version of this one. And yeah, that explains a lot. Of course Tetris Attack would have an options menu. There was a nearly complete one just sitting unused in Panel Upon. If anything, it'd be a shame to leave it out. I'd argue that if we want to analyze Tetris Attack's options menu, Panel Upon's menu is just as important to look at. It lets us see what the menu looked like partway into its development, and it's just flippin' cool. There are options here that aren't in Tetris Attack. There's some unique content. So, without further ado, let's see what they're all about. Firstly, just like every other option on the main menu, Yoshi and Lip have something to say about this one. If Google Translate is anything to go off of, their dialogue is more or less identical. You can change the settings for several options using this mode. For details, see the instructions. A place to make various settings. See the instructions for more details. I totally get why Yoshi mentions the instruction manual, since, yeah, there's a section in there about the options menu. But Lip mentioning it too is a little odd. Of course, since this menu was never finished and paneled upon, there's nothing about it in the game's manual. But I guess back when it was being worked on, it was already planned to show up in there? I wonder if they ever made any progress on that section before it was scrapped. If they did, I'd love to see it somehow. Alright, I think we can get into the options themselves now. The first one is called Text Type and appears only in Tetris Attack. It has two states to select from, ENG for English and JPN for Japanese. So yeah, it's a language toggle. Since Paneled Upon never had an English translation, it makes sense this option isn't available there. Changing the language to Japanese does affect some of the game's text, like all of the character dialogue, but a lot of other stuff stays in English. So what's up with that? Why isn't it put back into Japanese? Well, it's like that because, in Paneled Upon, a lot of that stuff was already in English. Yeah, seriously. Like, if you were confused why the game's options are in English, yeah, that's why. It just kinda does that. Having some English text here and there is pretty common in Japanese games, so it's not all too weird that Paneled Upon does the same, although it does have a bit more English than most games do. To my understanding, English is just seen as kinda cool looking in Japan, sort of like how a lot of English speakers think of French. But since it's pretty common for Japanese speakers to understand a bit of English, it works well enough for small stuff like game UI, allowing it to be used as an aesthetic thing more often. Anywho, the fact that Tetris Attack has a Japanese script to swap over to tells us something about its development. Considering the game was specifically created for non-Japanese audiences, isn't it kinda weird for it to have that? Like, this is not the same Japanese text that shows up in Paneled Upon. That game has different characters who are part of a different story. This is new Japanese text written specifically for the English version of this game. Why? Well, my personal theory is that Tetris Attack was first given all of its new dialogue by Paneled Upon's original writers, which were probably just programmers and stuff since that game doesn't have any writers, and that dialogue was then translated into English by the translation team. Since Tetris Attack doesn't have any English writers, just translators, it's either that, or the translation team was given full freedom to write Tetris Attack's story, and they also chose to write it in two different languages for some reason. So yeah, the first option seems a lot more likely to me. Alright, so that's Tetris Attack's first option, but what about Paneled Upon? If it doesn't have any language options, what takes their place? Well, over there, it's Time Set, which allows you to change how much time you're given in Time Trial. By default, it's set to 2 minutes, but this option adds the ability to set it to 1. So why isn't this in Tetris Attack? This feels like such a natural inclusion. Time Trial always felt kind of barren compared to the other modes because, yeah, there's only one time to race against. Having the ability to change that makes for so much more variety. The way this option was handled in Paneled Upon's menu is a bit lackluster, thanks to its measly 2 options, and the fact that changing the time to 1 minute prevents you from recording your scores on the leaderboard for some reason. But I think it's a good start. I'm not sure why it was abandoned here. It had a lot of potential to be something worthwhile. Personally, I think it would be awesome to just make the amount of time into an integer. You know, you just punch in the amount of minutes you want so it's more customizable. There are some other options that are already handled that way, so that kind of interface is already programmed in. But yeah, in this option's current and presumably final state, it's not all too helpful. The next option is Match Points, or Versus Point as it's called in Paneled Upon. As far as I can tell, the functionality is identical between both games. It can be set to either 1p or 2p, with 2 being the default. I'm guessing P stands for point, but aside from that, I'm not really sure what this does. So let's check the manual. This switch allows you to select how many games must be won to decide a versus mode match. Set this to either 1 point or 2. Okay, this is a bit misleading. Here, when the manual says Versus Mode Match, it doesn't mean any match in the mode called Versus. Instead, it's referring to the game's multiplayer modes, so the 2-player versions of Versus Mode and Time Trial. Okay, so based on the name of the option, Match Points, what do you think changes when it's set to 1 point versus 2 points? Yeah, the thing labeled points, right? And you'd be able to decide whether it needs to be set to 1 or 2 for someone to win the match. Well, no, it doesn't affect that at all. That points counter actually keeps track of how many matches have already been won, not how many points have been earned within a match. Instead, this option affects the amount of stars that appear at the bottom of the screen. In their initial states, these stars represent potential points to be earned within a match. Once a player wins a game, one of their stars will become activated and start jumping around. And once a player activates all of their stars, they will have won a match, and 1 point will be added to the point counter in the middle. So, yeah, this manual entry should have been written more carefully. In this little diagram on page 17, the stars are referred to as number of wins this match, while the points are referred to as number of matches won by each player, and I think that works a lot better. Interestingly enough, in the description of the two-player versus mode, it goes out of its way to say that the first player to win 2 games wins the match, which is kind of odd considering there's an option that's specifically designed to let you change that. Not a big deal though. Actually, I guess this option also could have benefited from being an integer. Like, you just punch in the amount of stars you want. Okay, the next option is Sound Test, which is present in both games, and lets you listen to all of the sound effects contained in that version. Both games have a lot of differing sound effects from each other, mainly with their voice clips since they have completely different characters to represent. So there are bound to be a lot of differences here. First of all, though, there's something about this option's interface that I should probably explain. The number used for selection here isn't in the usual decimal system. Instead, it's in hexadecimal, which is another counting system that's a bit more space-efficient and commonly used in more advanced forms of programming. In case you're not familiar with it, it's like the usual decimal system in that it starts with numbers 0 to 9, but instead of going straight to 10, it introduces letters A to F, which are used throughout the system as sort of continuations of what 1 to 9 do. So it goes 0 to 9, A to F, 10 to 19, 1A to 1F, 20 to 29, 2A to 2F, and so on. In Tetris Attack's sound test, this number can go up to E2, which is equivalent to 226 in decimal. In Panel to Pawn, it counts up to FF, or 255 in decimal. However, like most numbers in programming, the sound test actually starts counting from 0 instead of 1, which means there's one more sound than it might seem. So Tetris Attack's sound test has 227 sounds, and Panel to Pawn's has 256. This is a lot of stuff, and that fact presents an interesting question. How am I supposed to talk about any of this in a comprehensible way? Heck, how am I even supposed to comprehend it myself? I'm overwhelmed just thinking about talking about this in depth. Well, after some deliberation, I made a spreadsheet. Yeah, I combed through both games' sound tests, made one entry for every unique sound, and wrote down the sound test value for it in both games, to make keeping track of what shows up where nice and easy. Actually, making the spreadsheet was a little less easy, but yeah, this should help out a lot. Firstly, one very important thing I should mention is that Panel to Pawn's sound test is kind of very obviously unfinished. Like, it has all of the game's sounds, at least I didn't notice any missing ones, but it has 15 entries that just don't play anything. Specifically, 0, 10, 20, 40, 50, 70, 80, A0, B0, C0, D0, E0, F0, FE, and FF. So Panel to Pawn's sound test really only has 241 sounds. Except it actually has even less than that, because it also has a bunch of duplicate sounds. Like, guess how many times the centered variant of the block swapping sound appears? Okay, I don't actually know what you guessed, but it shows up 7 times! Why? The centered variant of the cursor sound shows up 3 times, the centered variant of the first pop sound shows up 3 times, the left variant of that sound shows up 5 times, and the right variant shows up 6 times! And finally, the left variant of Lip's voice shows up twice for whatever reason. If you want to exclude these duplicates, only keeping 1 of each sound, Panel to Pawn's total would go down another 20. So its sound test really only has 221 sounds. Now, for the most part, all of this stuff was cleaned up when the options menu was added officially in Tetris Attack. No empty slots, and no full-on duplicates. With 2 exceptions. Firstly, the sound that plays when jumping to the next level in the single-player versus mode. It shows up as both E and F for whatever reason. And there's also the left variant of Yoshi's voice, which shows up as both 9D and 46 somehow? These might have had something to do with the fact that both of these sounds weren't in Panel to Pawn at all, which probably made it a little harder to check for things like this. It's kind of interesting that specifically the left variant of Yoshi's voice shows up twice though, since, as I showed earlier, the same thing happens with the left variant of Lip's voice in Panel to Pawn. It even has similar sound test values. But yeah, Tetris Attack's sound test really only has 225 sounds. Except it kind of maybe doesn't. And actually, Panel to Pawn's total is kind of wrong too. Because of the 281 sounds on my spreadsheet, there are 198 that are just other pre-existing sounds but panned toward the left or right ear, and sometimes with added reverb. Because, yeah, these are given separate sound test entries for some reason. For example, in Tetris Attack, this is sound 0, this is sound 1, and this is sound 2. Yeah, that happens a lot. Most of these sounds are here because of the multiplayer, since there, player 1's sounds are panned left, while player 2's sounds are panned right. Now, to be clear, this technically doesn't mean that there are 198 sounds that could be removed from the list without taking away any substance. There are some sounds, like sounds 1 and 2 from Tetris Attack, which are just left and right variants of already existing centered sounds. However, almost all of the voice clips don't have centered versions at all. They only have left, right, left reverbed, and right reverbed variants. Technically, all of the variations are duplicates, but since there's no centered version of them, if you took away all 4, you'd be getting rid of the sound entirely. So, accounting for that, only keeping around one version of each sound to take the place of a centered version, there are only 172 of these panned duplicates. If you wanted to remove these from the totals, the spreadsheet would have 109 unique sounds, and each game only features 133 of these due to their different sets of voice clips, so Tetris Attack's sound test would have 93 unique sounds, and Panel Pons would have 88. However, one thing I should probably clarify is that the inclusion of these panned variants in the sound test seems to be very intentional based on how consistently it's done. Like, if they were considered a problem, they would have been cleaned up when the menu was brought over to Tetris Attack, like everything else was. So it's sort of up to you which totals you want to count as the real ones. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to include the panned variants in the total, since it seems like that's what the developers settled on. Another oddity is that, of the 281 sounds on my spreadsheet, 120 of them are panel-destroying sounds. This is because, when you destroy panels in a chain, the game plays one of 4 types of sounds, and for each panel destroyed, the pitch of the selected sound goes up. The first set of panels gets a pop sound, the second gets a wooden block, the third gets a drum, and everything after gets a clink sound. Each of these 4 sounds has 10 different pitches, making for 40 sounds. And since in multiplayer each player's sound effects are panned left or right, that number gets tripled, making for 120 of them. And in Panel Pons' case, these sounds take up 131 slots since there are 11 duplicates within them. Either way, in both games, these sounds take up like half the sound test entries. Okay, one final thing about the sound test before we move on. I should probably go over the few sounds that I don't recognize. E and EF from Panel Pon. They're not in Tetris Attack at all. They don't seem to be related to any other sounds in the sound test. They're just a low, repeating hum. The only difference between the two is that EF is a little louder. All I can really say about these two is that I'm pretty sure the sound being played is just a low A note on the flute sample used in some of the game's songs. But yeah, I have no clue what this could have been used for, or if it was even meant to be used. Maybe this sound is just the game trying to interpret some weird garbage data that happened to be left here thanks to the menu being unfinished. Okay, that's everything for the sound test. The next option is the music test, which is just the sound test, but, you know, music. Thankfully, this game has significantly fewer songs than sound effects, so this should be a lot easier to talk about. I still made a spreadsheet for it, though. In Tetris Attack, the number for this option can count up to 23, or 35 in decimal, and in Panel Pon, it counts up to 22, or 34 in decimal. But again, since the counter starts at 0 instead of 1, Tetris Attack's music test has 36 songs, while Panel Pon's has 35. Unlike the sound tests, which do actually contain every sound effect from each game, the music tests are missing quite a few songs. As an entire game, Tetris Attack contains 42 songs, while Panel Pon contains 41, meaning that both games' music tests are missing 6 songs. So, which songs are they? Well, they're actually the same ones in both games, being all 5 of the credits themes and the score tallying theme that plays right before one of them. To be specific, they're both missing the credits theme for scoring higher than 50,000 points in Endless Mode, the score tallying theme for scoring 99,999 points in Endless Mode, the credits theme that plays right after that, the stage clear mode credits theme, the puzzle mode credits theme, and the single player versus mode credits theme. Although my organization-obsessed little heart is slightly annoyed these songs aren't available in the music tests. Yeah, no, this makes complete sense to me. These songs were all designed to play after you do something very cool and or very difficult. Like, it took me an hour and a half of non-stop gameplay to get 99,999 points. That crap is no joke. Considering that each of these moments has a unique song to accompany it, I think the music was supposed to be a big part of the reward here. And because of that, putting these songs in the music tests would probably ruin a part of the fun. When Panel Dapon's characters were traded out for their Tetris Attack equivalents, all of their music was kept unchanged. With one exception, Lip. When she was replaced with Yoshi, her stage music was replaced with a cover of the opening theme from Yoshi's Island. So, since it got replaced, Lip's theme should be completely absent from Tetris Attack's music test, right? Well, no. It has a value of C, and its danger variant that plays when you're close to losing is D. So, why are they here? Well, it's because they still show up in the actual game, just not through Lip's stage. In Panel Dapon, the How to Play menu contains a couple tutorials that are led by Lip, and naturally, her stage theme plays in the background. But in Tetris Attack, when these were altered to be hosted by Yoshi, the music was left unchanged. It still plays Lip's theme. Honestly, I quite like this decision. I think it makes sense. The opening theme of Yoshi's Island is a pretty beautiful song, and even though the cover featured in Tetris Attack is a bit more upbeat, it doesn't really fit the more playful vibe the tutorials have quite as well as Lip's theme does. I think, in the context of Tetris Attack as a standalone game, it fits well enough as a designated tutorial theme. So, why the heck is the danger version here? Like, the tutorials are just demonstrations. You don't even get to do anything. Why would that ever play? Well, it actually plays for a bit in the final lesson as you're taught about clearing away garbage blocks, since the panels get high enough that the song is naturally triggered. So, yeah, that's why Lip's theme shows up in both games' music tests. Come to think of it, there's another song with pretty similar circumstances to Lip's theme, although it'll take a bit more explanation to get to, so bear with me for a sec. Cordelia is the final boss of Panel Dapon's single-player versus mode, and her stage music sounds like this. On the other hand, Bowser is the final boss of Tetris Attack's single-player versus mode, and his stage music sounds like this. You might have noticed. These are not the same song. Like, not even close. Why? Well, to get this out of the way, it's not because Bowser's theme is a new arrangement made specifically for Tetris Attack, like Yoshi's theme was. Bowser's theme in Tetris Attack is actually the theme song of Panel Dapon's semi-final boss, Thanatos. In addition to that, Bowser also has a far more similar intro cutscene to Thanatos, and... Wait, what happened to Cordelia? Well, believe it or not, she has no equivalent in Tetris Attack. There's just nothing like her in the game. So, what's going on here? Is Tetris Attack missing a boss fight? Does its single-player versus mode have one less fight than Panel Dapon's? Well, thankfully, no. In their final areas, both games have 4 battles. Panel Dapon has a battle with a phoenix, a battle with a dragon, a climactic, seemingly final fight with Thanatos, before the twist of an even more climactic, actual final battle with Cordelia. On the other hand, Tetris Attack has a battle with a Hookbill Koopa, a battle with a Naval Piranha, a very normal battle with Kamek, which is just a reskin of the first 2 fights, and then a final battle with Bowser. So, yeah, they just casually restructured the whole final area to get rid of a cool and climactic final battle. My best guess as to why this ever happened is that there aren't really 2 Yoshi characters who can stand in for Panel Dapon's 2 big bads. At least in 1996, back when Yoshi's Island was pretty much the only mainline Yoshi game, Kamek was kind of the best option under Bowser. But there was no way he could be a fitting replacement for Thanatos. He's just not intimidating enough for something like that. So, I think they made the right call here. But wait, Cordelia's stage shows up in Tetris Attack's music test. Sure, its danger variant isn't there, for some reason, but how does that work? Well, although Bowser's fight is largely a reskin of Thanatos's, it's not that entirely. For one, its background is an adaptation of the dragons, but more importantly, it still managed to carry over one thing from Cordelia's battle. In Panel Dapon, when Cordelia appears on the map, her battle theme starts playing to add a bit more suspense. And in Tetris Attack, despite Bowser's intro animation being adapted from Thanatos, Cordelia's music is used. It plays Cordelia's theme on the map, and that's why it appears in the sound test. That fact also pretty much explains why the danger variant doesn't show up anywhere in Tetris Attack. Like, where would you even put it? This is basically a static screen. There's no reason to have a more intense version of the song start playing. The next option is just called Character. Huh, I wonder what this does. Okay, I guess I'll just, Wait, this exists? Yeah. Apparently, tucked away into Tetris Attack's options menu, there are just custom-written character bios for everybody in the game. And you know what makes this even cooler? This option is in Panel to Pawn too, meaning that not only do we get more info about a bunch of pre-existing Yoshi characters, we get info on Panel to Pawn's characters. Oh, right. In Panel to Pawn, full sentences are written in Japanese. Fortunately for us, way back in 2007, an English fan translation of Panel to Pawn was hosted by Zukio, with some additional artwork done by Dr. Mario, and the actual translation work done by Jubilox and Dabubba. Of course, this isn't quite the same thing as an official English translation, but it's stood the test of time for around 20 years now, and is pretty much the standard for playing Panel to Pawn in English. I'm just grateful something like it exists at all. Something I should probably point out about these bios is that, unlike most other things in Panel to Pawn's options menu, there's actually a way to view them without any mods. If the game is left without any input on the title screen, it'll begin cycling between a bunch of different visuals. There's some gameplay clips, tutorials, and yeah, the character bios. They're all thrown into one little scene together, and the game just quickly fades between them in a sequence, meaning you don't need to wait for them all to show up randomly as individual scenes. Regardless, it still takes a good while to see them, because of just how many other title screen visuals the game can choose from. And since they fade by so fast, it can be kind of hard to digest all the information without taking screenshots to read off of. This whole method of viewing them feels kinda clunky. These definitely belong in a menu where you can click through them at your own pace. The only bios that don't show up on the title screen are Thanatos and Cordelia's, probably since it would be kinda weird to spoil who the final bosses are on the game's title screen. So yeah, I guess those ones are unused. By the way, this whole title screen thing was actually carried over into Tetris Attack, despite the options menu being an actual feature in that game. And unlike in Panel to Pawn, every single bio shows up here, including Bowser's. In Tetris Attack's story, Bowser is treated as less of a mysterious force and more of just a common thread who's at it again. Like, he's literally mentioned in the third text box of the single-player versus mode. There isn't too much to spoil here. In both games, the counter for this option goes up to C, or 13 in decimal. Across both games, this makes for a total of 26 bios to read, and I'm gonna read every single one of them. And do funny voices for everyone. Well, I guess I can't for Panel to Pawn since those are in third person, but yeah.
Hello everyone, I am Yoshi. I'm very glad to see you all again. A little problem has come up here, but with help from little Yoshi, I think we can take care of it.
I love Yoshi's energy in this game. He is pretty much this supportive and optimistic the entire time.
Hey you, my name's Lakitu. A funny thing happened today. I had to stop to play a game with Yoshi. Hey, ever hear the one about the Koopa King, Yoshi, and a Magic Koopa?
No, I have not. Can you tell me? No? Okay.
Hello everyone, I am Bumpty. The ice world is my home. Brr! People think I'm cute, but I hate that. Instead, you should just think of me as being cool.
Alright, valid. I can respect that.
Look at their little dance though, they're so adorable!
I am Poochie.
Ruff ruff!
You didn't know I like monkeys? Well see, I'm friends with everybody.
Ruff!
Especially that Yoshi. He gives me eggs.
Ruff ruff ruff!
Poochie never change. He's such a freaking sweetheart, oh my gosh, I can't.
I am a flying wiggler. I like the pretty flowers so much. Being surrounded by so many lovely things makes me so happy.
No, that's so sweet. You're right, the flowers are quite lovely.
Hey there! Don't step on my friends.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Ribbit, ribbit. Froggy here. For frogs, rain is good. But, ribbit, not everyone is so happy about it. Ribbit. Well, ribbit, I don't care. Ribbit.
Okay.
I am a blarg, Gargantua blarg. My exploits are kind of famous. I rule the lava world and all should fear me. But lately, this rain has been putting a damper on my powers.
I always thought this blarg design was really nice. It manages to look really cute while still being a tad intimidating.
Howdy y'all, I'm a lungefish. You wanna know what I think? I don't really like that Yoshi guy. He gives me indigestion? What? I don't think that's supposed to happen. Are you okay? Got anything to eat? I'm kinda hungry. Raphael Raven here. Caw! It's Yoshi. Caw! It's Yoshi. Caw! Raphael has to caw. Raphael has to caw. Play and defeat. Caw. Play and defeat. Caw. That darn Yoshi. Caw.
Okay. The Shy Guys are very cute, by the way. Plus, I love how he's on his boss arena from Yoshi's Island.
I'm a Koopa. Hookbill Koopa. It's my job to beat Yoshi, and I'm gonna make mincemeat out of that cocky little wimp.
Aw, come on, you got this.
I'm a naval piranha plant. Hey Yoshi, ready to give in yet? Do you still dream of defeating me? Haha, go see your mama, you little green lizard. Go home and cry, baby.
Oh my gosh, what is wrong with you? What did Yoshi ever do to you?
I am the magical genius, Kamek. This is it, you little... Now bow down to me. No, better yet, kneel down for your new master. Kneel before Kamek. Tee-hee-hee!
Kamek, why is the T capitalized? That's not a new sentence. Also, you're creepy and weird.
I am the king. I am Bowser. Go, Yoshi, while you still can. You'll never beat me. Not in 10 years. Not in 100 years. Not even in 100,000 years will you beat me.
Okay, and now for Panel to Pawn's bios. Again, unlike Tetris attacks, these are narrated from a third-person perspective rather than being spoken by the actual character. That gives them a little less personality, so I don't really have much to say about them, but there's still some cool stuff here. It's always fun to learn more about these characters considering just how little information is available on them. Fairy of Flowers, Lip. This energetic fairy uses her flower rod for good and justice. Although she's a bit of a tomboy, she is this game's heroine, so help her out. Fairy of Wind, Windy. This girl uses her lively wind for mischief. She's good friends with the birds and is always together with everyone. Fairy of Ice, Sherbet. A child who may look cold-hearted, but is just very calm. Sherbet loves to make trouble. She also looks very sweet because she's still a child. Fairy of Nature, Tiana. The nature-loving Tiana is an active girl who resides in the forest. Furthermore, she is very good friends with the Risu and Kururu. In case you're curious, the Risu are the squirrels that appear on Tiana's stage, and Kururu is the name of this specific squirrel. Special thanks to StunningPen8332 on the r/translator subreddit for helping me with that one. There's some weird grammar stuff going on that makes it kinda hard to tell what's what. Fairy of Jewels, Ruby. This fairy uses beautiful jewels. Ruby has a very strong sense of responsibility. It is rumored that she is the real leader of the pack. Fairy of Water, Elias. This water fairy often dreams about romance. Her singing skills always put the Kappa Kyoritan in trance. This character is a lot easier to identify. A kappa is a water monster from Japanese folklore, and by taking one good look at this little fella from Elias's stage, yeah, that's Kappa Kyoritan. Fairy of Fire, Flare. This Fairy of Fire is very energetic. Personality-wise, she kindles easily in her enthusiasm, but when she runs out, it's scary. Fairy of the Sea, Neris. A close friend of the Water Fairy, the song-loving Neris enjoys singing on the beach on a moonlit night. Fairy of the Moon, Celine. She's the oldest of the fairies. Celine is a very gentle leader, but she has a little too much pride at certain times. Big Bird, Phoenix. This disgusting monster, oh my gosh, came from an unknown place and causes only misery. If insulted, he'll get angry and violent. Monster, Dragon. Along with the Phoenix, this outrageous monster does only evil. Normally, he is always asleep, but when he's angry, you'd better watch out. And finally for these character bios, let's look at the two unused ones that only appear in the options menu. Thanatos and Cordelia. Demon King, Thanatos. Dragon and Phoenix both fear and obey him. His evil laugh and mighty voice echo throughout the whole world. Goddess, Cordelia. Not even Thanatos can compare to her power, an enemy who takes pride in her great strength. But she also hides a great secret. Okay, the next option in this menu is CPU switch, or just CP switch in Panel to Pawn. According to the manual, after selecting this option, the screen pictured below will appear. You can choose to turn on the CPU player for either player or both. The CPU player's skill level can also be selected. Choose from 8 levels, numbered 0 through 7. The higher the number, the quicker and more skillful the CPU player will be. So, to phrase that in a more straightforward way, this option can be used to set any of the player characters to be controlled by the game itself, as if it were an opponent from the single-player versus mode. And you can also adjust its skill level however you'd like. That's a super cool feature. Like, it's not huge or anything, but it allows for a surprising amount of variety and experimentation in how you want to play. Want to play against a really easy CPU? Sure. Want to set player 1 to a CPU and use the second controller for yourself? Yeah, why not? Want to watch 2 level 7 Bowsers duke it out on max difficulty settings? Heck yeah, of course you can do that! It's pretty much the final step in allowing you to make whatever kind of match you want, and that's a really great option to have. Initially, I fully expected this option to only affect the multiplayer modes. After all, using it in the single-player content would effectively be cheating, right? You could just let the game play itself for you, and that's no fun. But no, it works just about everywhere. When messing around with this setting, I got kind of curious how much you could do with it. So I started to wonder, what's the hardest thing you can achieve in these games? Well, that's probably beating the final boss of the single-player versus mode's secret super hard difficulty, accessed by holding up and L as you select the regular hard mode. So I set player 1 to be a level 7 CPU, typed in the password to access that level, and the game just let it happen. The CPU even ended up beating Bowser. But then this screen showed up. Hey, quit trying to cheat. To see the ending, you must turn the CPU switch off. Okay, that's good. At least there's some kind of safeguard here so it doesn't completely break the game. But this got me wondering, how many safeguards are there? Where do they show up? And of course, how do these measures differ in panel to pawn? So I did a bit more testing, and I think I've found out how it works for each mode. Endless is the simplest. It doesn't have multiple stages, or really any kind of progression, so in Tetris Attack, if you ever play this mode with the player 1 CPU switch enabled, even if you set it to level 0 so it fails instantly, this screen shows up. However, in panel to pawn, there are straight up no protection measures. It treats the CPU like it's an actual player, even letting you save its high scores. Time trial is kind of interesting because the cheating screen never shows up. Instead, in both games, if the CPU survives for the full time, you just won't be allowed to save its high score. Unlike when this happened with the time set option, the score screen does show up, you just don't get to register anything on it. Stage clear is nice and simple. The CPU can play through the entire thing just fine, but instead of seeing the credits, you get the cheating screen in Tetris Attack, and you're sent straight back to the title screen in panel to pawn. Puzzle is really interesting, because as far as I can tell, it is the only place in Tetris Attack where the CPU switch outright doesn't work. It does nothing in either game. This is probably because of two overlapping reasons. One, the CPU wouldn't get the solutions right. Unlike the other modes, where all you really need to do is clear the blocks as fast as you can while going for a lot of combos, Puzzle requires you to make very specific moves, and there's usually only one correct solution. The CPU just isn't designed for that kind of thing. And two, even if the CPU was given a separate design for puzzle mode to make sure it would work accurately, you could just use it to tell you the solutions, since they're the same every time. And that kinda ruins the whole point of the mode. So I think disabling it makes sense here. Finally, the single-player versus mode works the same way as stage clear. Well, at least in Tetris Attack. Everything functions normally until the CPU beats the final boss, where the cheating screen shows up instead of the credits. However, in panel to pawn, it instead functions like it did in puzzle mode, so the CPU switch does absolutely nothing. Odd. One thing that's very important to note about all this is that there was somehow absolutely no effort put into hiding level passwords from you while the CPU switch is on. So, for example, you could technically have a CPU play through the entirety of stage clear up to the final boss, copy down that level's password, and type it in to beat on your own. The game has this password system because it doesn't have any save data, but because it doesn't have any save data, it isn't able to keep track of how you got each password, which means if you get them with the CPU switch, it will have no idea and assume you played fair and square. This isn't too big of a deal, since you'll still need to legitimately beat the final level to see the ending of a mode. You're probably not going to be ready to beat that if you skipped everything else. But it's still kinda strange, and probably an oversight. Finally, for Tetris Attack, we've got a pretty small one. Mark on/off. Yeah, I don't know what this one means either. Okay, so according to the manual, when the mark switch is on, a transparency effect makes the mark less visible. Okay? What's a mark? Thankfully, the image provided here is a lot more helpful. Turns out the mark is this number that tells you how many panels you're clearing during a chain. So, yeah, this option lets you make it slightly see-through by just adding a flickering effect. And our final option to take a look at is Etc. from panel to pawn. It's a submenu containing two unrelated options. The first one is just the mark thing I already mentioned, except this time it's called mark on and off. But the other one is something that's entirely unique to panel to pawn, versus CP game level. This option lets you control the game level, aka the speed that the blocks rise at, in the single player versus mode, and you can set an individual level for each difficulty. So yeah, why can you control this? Like, the difficulty options are specifically there to let you customize the experience to fit your skill level, And these difficulties have a pretty well thought out progression system. To encourage you to improve, the harder the difficulty, the more battles you get to do. The easy difficulty ends after the fight with the dragon or naval piranha. The normal difficulty ends after the fight with Thanatos or Kamek, and the hard and super hard difficulties end after the fight with Cordelia or Bowser. Allowing you to customize the difficulty of these difficulties completely breaks this progression system. You can just make everything easier. Sure, a lot of the difficulty comes from the CPU difficulty levels, which you can't change here, but the game level definitely plays a role. Because of all this, part of me wonders if this option was added for the sake of testing, like fine-tuning each difficulty's game level to make sure it felt right, and was never planned to show up in the final game. I just can't see any other reason to add something like this. Anyhow, the numbers for this option can count up to A, or 10 in decimal. But again, since numbers in this game begin counting from 0... Oh. There's no 0 here. Yeah, this option has 10 levels to choose from, just like the multiplayer modes do. As a side effect of allowing us to change these levels, this option lets us see what their default values are. The easy difficulty uses level 2, the normal difficulty uses level 4, and hard and super hard both use level 6 since they always share the same value. This means that 1, there's a level below what's used in the easy difficulty, and 2, there are 4 levels that are above what's used in hard and super hard. Huh. And I think we're kind of done here. Yeah, that's just about everything I've got to say about Panel Upon and Tetris Attack's options menus. I hope through seeing just how much I had to say about these, you can sort of understand what I meant when I said these games are very, very odd. Because that oddness is one of the things I love most about them. There's so much about them and their relationship to each other that just doesn't make any sense to anyone uninitiated with them. And I think that's kind of awesome. I love how these games are different from each other. In an old 1998 interview from Game Hayao magazine with Toshitaka Muramatsu, one of Panel Upon's 3 directors, there's something he says that I find kind of interesting. The characters are drawn in a very non-Nintendo manner, too. They were originally just temporary images. We told the female designer, they're eventually going to have us add Yoshi or that geezer with the mustache, so until then, just go ahead and draw whatever you'd like. And they ended up being adopted as is. This interview is from over a year after Tetris Attack came out, so that game not being addressed seems a little odd, but it is alluded to as something they figured would happen eventually. Seems like they were kinda surprised they got as far as they did with Panel Upon. It's what Intelligent Systems was hoping to make, and miraculously, they got to make it, and it's incredible. But then, they had to make Tetris Attack, a game that, with proper context, should feel kinda depressing. It was the result of a team who loved what they made, having to change it, abandoning its characters and world. Like, I care about artistic intent. A lot. In theory, this kind of thing should be my worst nightmare. But Tetris Attack doesn't feel depressing. At least, not to me. It feels like it was given just as much love, care, and appreciation as Panel Upon was. Nothing feels begrudging or rushed. Its new art is just as incredible, its new music is just as lively, the things that were retooled feel incredibly natural, and, of course, it features a certain piece of cut content that I'm sure someone on the dev team was happy to be able to finish. I think it's important to stress that, at least in the long run, Tetris Attack didn't replace Panel Upon, and I think that's a part of why I'm not too shaken up by all this. Like, Panel Upon is the first one I played. I didn't even find out about Tetris Attack until years later. Now that I know of, and have thoroughly played both of these games, they feel more like 2 sides of the same coin for me. I play both of them all the time, they complement each other really well. Sure, they were region-locked when they came out, but now, we have both of them, and you can just play whichever one you want. And you're telling me they're both fun, and cute, and good, and full of personality? That's, like, kind of a great outcome. Basically, I love these games. Both of these games. A lot. And I hope my incessant yapping about this obscure little piece of them has helped to highlight why. I hope to see you next time, but if I don't, it was really nice knowing you. Keep spreading love. Oh boy, this was quite the long one, huh? I was absolutely not expecting it to be this long, but after researching Tetris Attack's options menu, I found out about Panel Upon's unused one, and the ambition just exploded from there. I hope it managed to be interesting, and maybe brought some value to your day. I'm not expecting this one to do nearly as well as the last one did, especially since Panel Upon is so niche. But I think I'm okay with that. I'm just glad anyone watches these videos. Oh, and to the person who asked for there to be at least one frame of Animal Crossing Puzzle League, here you go. Sakurai, please put Lip in the next Smash game, I'm begging you.